Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Chapter 14, the three modes of material nature. Atha Chaturdashodhyaya. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Parambhuya Pravakshami Jnanam Gnanamuttamam Yagnatva Munaya Sarve Parasiddhi Mato Gata.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "Again, I shall declare to you this supreme wisdom, the best of all knowledge, knowing which all the sages have attained the supreme perfection."
Text 2. Idam Gnanamupashritya Mama Sadharmyamagata Sargepi Nopajayante Pralayena Vyathitanti cha.
By becoming fixed in this knowledge, one can attain to the transcendental nature like my own. Thus established, one is not born at the time of creation or disturbed at the time of dissolution.
Text 3. Mama yonir mahad brahma tasmin garbha dadamyaham sambhava sarva bhutanam tato bhavati bharata.
The total material substance, called Brahman, is the source of birth, and it is that Brahman that I impregnate, making possible the births of all living beings, O son of Bharata.
Text 4. Sarva yonishu konteya murtaya sambhavanti ya tasa brahma mahotonim aham bija pradapita.
It should be understood that all species of life, O son of Kunti, are made possible by birth in this material nature, and that I am the seed-giving father.
Text 5. Sattvam rajastam iti guna prakriti sambhava nibadanti mahabaho dehe dehi nama avyayam.
Material nature consists of three modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. When the eternal living entity comes in contact with nature, O mighty armed Arjun, he becomes conditioned by these modes.
Text 6. Tatra sattvam nirmalatvat prakasham manayam sukha sangeti badnati gnana sangena chanaga.
O sinless one, the mode of goodness, being purer than the others, is illuminating, and it frees one from all sinful reactions. Those situated in that mode become conditioned by a sense of happiness and knowledge.
Text 7. Rajo ragatmakam vritti trushna sanga samadbhavam tanni bandhati konteya karma sangena dehinam.
The mode of passion is born of unlimited desires and longings, O son of Kunti, and because of this, the embodied living entity is bound to material, fruitive actions.
Text 8. Tamastvajnananjam vidi mohanam sarvadehinam pramadalayasya nindram vestina bandhati bharata.
O son of Bharata, know that the mode of darkness, born of ignorance, is the delusion of all embodied living entities. The results of this mode are madness, indolence, and sleep, which bind the conditioned soul.
Text 9. Sattvam sukhe sajjayati raja karmani bharata gnanama vrutyatu tama pramade sajjayatyut.
O son of Bharata, the mode of goodness conditions one to happiness, passion conditions one to fruitive action, and ignorance, covering one's knowledge, binds one to madness.
Text 10. Rajastam shibi bhuyam sattvam bhavati bharata rajasattvam tamaschaiva tamasattvam rajastata.
Sometimes the mode of goodness becomes prominent, defeating the modes of passion and ignorance, O son of Bharat. Sometimes the mode of passion defeats goodness and ignorance, and at other times ignorance defeats goodness and passion. In this way, there is always competition for supremacy.
Text 11. Sarvadvareshu dehesmin prakasha upajayate gnanam yada tada vidyat vrutim sattva mityut.
The manifestations of the mode of goodness can be experienced when all the gates of the body are illuminated by knowledge.
Text 12. Lobha pravrtira arambha karmanam spruha rajasyetani jayante vivrutte bharatarshava.
O chief of the Bharatas, when there is an increase in the mode of passion, the symptoms of great attachment, fruitive activity, intense endeavor, and uncontrollable desire and hankering develop.
Text 13. Aprakasho pravrittischa pramado moha evacha tasmetani jayante vivrutte kurunandana.
When there is an increase in the mode of ignorance, O son of Guru, darkness, inertia, madness, and illusion are manifested.
Text 14. Yada sattve pravrutte tu pralayam yati dehabhut tadottam vidalokanam amala pratipadyate.
When one dies in the mode of goodness, he attains to the pure higher planets of the great sages.
Text 15. Rajasi pralayam gatva karma sangeshu jayate tratha pralinastasmasi mudayonishu jayate.
When one dies in the mode of passion, he takes birth among those engaged in fruitive activities, and when one dies in the mode of ignorance, he takes birth in the animal kingdom.
Text 16. Karmana sukrutya sahu satvikam nirmalam phalam rajasastu phalam dukham ajnanam tamasa phalam.
The result of pious action is pure and is said to be in the mode of goodness. But action done in the mode of passion results in misery, and action performed in the mode of ignorance results in foolishness.
Sattvat sajjayate gnanam rajaso lobha evacha pramada moho tamaso bhavato gnanamevacha.
From the mode of goodness, real knowledge develops. From the mode of passion, greed develops. And from the mode of ignorance develop foolishness, madness, and illusion. I already said that, sorry. Did I skip one?
No, I think you're okay.
I'm okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Text 18. Urdhva gachanti sattvastha madhye tishtanti rajasa jadanya guna vrittistha adho gachanti tamasa.
Those situated in the mode of goodness gradually go upward to the higher planets. Those in the mode of passion live on the earthly planets, and those in the abominable mode of ignorance go down to the hellish worlds.
Text 19. Nanyam gunebhyu kartaram yada drashtanupashyati gunebhyascha param veti madbhavam sodhi gacchati.
When one properly sees that in all activities no other performer is at work than these modes of nature, and he knows the Supreme Lord, who is transcendental to all these modes, he attains my spiritual nature.
Text 20. Gunani tani tityatran dehi deha samudbhavan janma mrityu jara dukher vimukto mritashmashrute.
When the embodied being is able to transcend these three modes associated with the material body, he can become free from birth, death, old age, and their distresses, and can enjoy nectar even in this life.
Text 21. Arjuna uvacha kalange strin gunanetan yatato bhavati prabhu kim achara katham chaitam strin gunanyati vartate.
Arjun inquired, "O my dear Lord, by which symptoms is one known who is transcendental to these three modes? What is his behavior, and how does he transcend the modes of nature?"
Text 22 to 25. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Prakasham cha pravritti cham mohameva cha pandava na drishti sampravrittani na nivrittani kankshati udasina vadasino gunyo na vichalayate gunavartantya ityevam yo vitisthati negate Sama dukha sukha swastha samaloष्टा समकाञ्चन तुल्या प्रिया प्रियो धीरस् तुल्य निन्दात्म संस्तुति मानपमान्यो स्तुल्यो मित्रो रिपक्षयो सर्वारंभ परित्यागी गुणातीत च उच्यते स उच्यते.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "O son of Bandu, he who does not hate illumination, attachment, and delusion when they are present, or long for them when they disappear, who is unwavering and undisturbed through all these reactions of the material qualities, remaining neutral and transcendental, knowing that the modes alone are active, who is situated in the self and regards alike happiness and distress, who looks upon a lump of earth, a stone, and a piece of gold with an equal eye, who is equal toward the desirable and the undesirable, who is steady, situated equally well in praise and blame, honor and dishonor, who treats alike both friend and enemy, and who has renounced all material activities. Such a person is said to have transcended the modes of nature."
Text 26. Macham yo vibhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan sanmatyetan brahma bhuvaya kalpate.
One who engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman.
Text 27. Brahmano hi pratishtaham amrutasya vyavayasya cha shasvatasya cha dharmasya sukhasyekantikasya cha.
And I am the basis of the impersonal Brahman, which is immortal, imperishable, and eternal, and is the constitutional position of ultimate happiness.
Om Tassa Srimad Bhagavad Gita Shu Upanishadshu Brahma Vidyaya Yoga Shastre Shri Krishna Arjuna Samvade Gunatriya Vibho Yoga Nama Chaturtadashodhyaya. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Prabhuta Mataji and Gita Mataji, for that wonderful recitation of both the Sanskrit and English. So we'll now move on to discussion of text number 15. Before we do so, we will recite the Mangala Charana praise like we traditionally do. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmalitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vanchakalpa Turubhyascha Kripasindubhyeva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vashadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Namo Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale, Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschachate Shatarine. Srila Prabhupada ki. So first of all, I'd like to wish all of you all a very happy new year. I think it's the first time I'm meeting together with you all since 2020. It's been wonderful associating with all of you all for almost close to 9 months. And we've been on a wonderful journey together. And I look forward to spending much of 2020 together in your association. It's a great blessing to be involved in so many wonderful Vaishnavas who have a taste for reciting Bhagavad Gita every day. So thank you very much. Hare Krishna. So today we'll proceed with our discussion of text number 15. Rajasi prayalam gatva karma sangesha jayate tata pralinastamasi mudayonisho jayate. When one dies in the mode of passion, he takes birth among those engaged in fruitive activities. And when one dies in the mode of ignorance, just want to disable. Someone's unfortunately doing the annotations. When one dies in the mode of passion, he takes birth among those engaged in fruitive activities. And when one dies in the mode of ignorance, he takes birth in the animal kingdom. So let me just stop the share and share again because these annotations become a distraction. Purport by Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Some people have the impression that when the soul reaches the platform of human life, it never goes down again. This is incorrect. According to this verse, if one develops the mode of ignorance, after his death, he is degraded to an animal form of life. From there, one has to again elevate himself by an evolutionary process to come again to the human form of life. Therefore, those who are actually serious about human life should take to the mode of goodness and in good association, transcend the modes and become situated in Krishna consciousness. This is the aim of human life. Otherwise, there is no guarantee that the human being will again attain to the human status. So just to place this verse in context, we'll do a quick recap of what has been stated by the Lord this far. So the Lord starts off by explaining that this chapter, he will explain about how the living entities become bound in this material nature. And Krishna says in particular that by becoming fixed in this knowledge, one can attain to the transcendental nature just like his own. And thus, established in this knowledge, one does not take birth again. So Krishna first starts to explain how the three modes of material nature bind the jiva. And the Lord does this by describing the characteristics of each of the three modes, the mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance. After describing the characteristics of each of the three modes, Krishna then says that there is competition among the three modes. But one will find that at any one point in time, there will be prominence of a particular mode. And then the Lord describes the characteristics when there is a predominance of one particular mode, although there are other modes in action. And then we come to these verses 14 to 15, where the Lord now describes the destination of one situated in all of the three different modes. And Krishna says that one who dies being influenced by the mode of goodness, they take birth again in the higher planets of the great sages, in planets like Brahmaloka or Janaloka, still within the material world, but in a better situation, in the planet of the sages. Now in this verse, which we are discussing today, text number 15, Krishna talks about the destination of those who die in the mode of passion and in the mode of ignorance. And Krishna says, those who die in the mode of passion, they take birth among those engaged in fruitive activities, and it is mentioned on the earthly planet. And then those who die in ignorance, they take birth in the lower species among the animal kingdom. Those who are wise, those who have analyzed their situation in this material world, certainly will have no desire to take birth in the lower species of life. And neither will one have the desire to take birth again in the earthly planet, simply engaged in fruitive activities. Because as Prahlad Maharaj describes in the Srimad Bhagavatam, being in such a situation is like chewing the chewed. No one is interested in chewing that which has been chewed, in which all of the taste or all of the juice has been extracted. There is just no taste in chewing the chewed, meaning that there's just no sensibility in wanting to become engaged in fruitive activities again. It's just useless. Srila Prabhupada, in one class, he describes the three modes of material nature. And this is in the context of this verse. He gives a nice example. He says, according to your guna, you are creating your next body. Just like according to the infection of a certain disease, you are creating your future disease condition. Similarly, sattva gun, rajagun, tamagun. There are three kinds of modes of material nature. And as you associate with the three kinds of material nature, you prepare your next body. And then Prabhupada gives a very nice further analogy. Prabhupada says there are varieties of life. And why are there different varieties of life? Because we have infected different varieties of infection. There are three kinds of infection: sattvagun, tamagun, rajagun, and tamagun. And Prabhupada, you see, twice he has used the word infection. To be under the influence of either the sattvagun, rajagun, or tamagun, it is being under some type of infection, the infection of the material modes. Just like some disease, the symptoms are mild. That is like the mode of goodness. Other disease, the effect and the symptoms are more pronounced. That is like rajagun. And some diseases, the infection is very strong. It takes hold of one in a very significant way. And Prabhupada compares these three modes, like how Krishna says they are different permutations, like three primary colors we have. The three primary colors are red, yellow, and blue. Now, if you take those three colors and you mix them, it becomes 9. And then you carry on mixing, it becomes 9 into 9, which is 81. So just So those who are expert color mixers, they can make varieties of colors originally from these three colors. So Prabhupada says, similarly, these three modes, if you mix them in different permutations, you can land up with 81 different permutations. Yeah? And Prabhupada said it's for this reason that we have so many different species of life, 8,400,000 species of life. Prabhupada says this is due to the mixture of the different modes. We all know from our previous readings of Bhagavad Gita that whatever consciousness is predominant at the time of death, to that state we will attain in our next life. So these modes of material nature, they certainly affect and influence our next birth. That's without doubt. So one who is striving to reach a certain type of birth in the next life, a superior birth, and in particular, a birth that takes us beyond the material world, we have to become free from this various degrees, as Prabhupada says, of infection. So we'll speak a bit more about the infection from Rajagun and Tamagun at the time of death. We'll take some various examples. So Krishna says in this verse that when one dies in the mode of passion, he takes birth among those engaged in fruitive activities. So what do we mean by fruitive activities? I'll read one verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th canto, 25th chapter, text number 4. This is Narad Muni instructing King Prachina Bharisat. And Narad Muni tells King Prachina Bharisat, this King Prachina Bharisat, he was very much into his fruitive activities, his fruitive sacrifices. And he was completely absorbed in performing all the mundane ritualistic fruitive activities that was advocated in the Vedas. So Narad Muni saw this King Prachina Bharisat in that condition, and he wanted him to take him out of it. And he gave him very wonderful instructions in largely the 25th chapter of the 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And then Narad Muni explains to him the effects of fruitive activities. He says, my dear king, what do you desire to achieve by performing these fruitive activities? The chief aim of life is to get rid of all miseries and enjoy happiness. But these two things cannot be realized by fruitive activities. That means getting rid of all miseries and enjoying happiness. This can never be realized by fruitive activities. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes, in this material world, there is a great illusion which covers real intelligence. A man in the mode of passion wants to work very hard to derive some benefit. But he does not know that time will never allow him to enjoy anything permanently. Compared with the work one expends, the gain is not so profitable. Even if it is profitable, it is not without distress. If a man is not born rich and he wants to purchase a house, cars, and other material things, he has to work hard day and night for many years in order to possess them. Thus, happiness is not attained without undergoing some distress. Actually, pure happiness cannot be had within this material world. What Srila Prabhupada has just expressed there, I think many of us have realizations of this. That nothing can be gained in this material world, at least for most people, without hard work. And most of the time we work so hard that, relatively speaking, the time that is left to enjoy the fruits of that hard labor is so limited. Prabhupada gives the example. He says sometimes a rich man, he buys a big property, a very luxurious property near the seaside. And he has many servants. But this rich man, at best, maybe for 1 or 2 weeks of the year, he gets an opportunity to go to this luxurious property and enjoy. The other times, it's mainly the servants that are enjoying the property. While the man is away, they're enjoying the gardens, they're enjoying the house, and so on. So this endeavor for fruitive activity is just, it makes no sense. And Prabhupada says, on the whole, suffering is the nature of this material world. And whatever enjoyment we are trying to achieve is simply illusion. After all, we have to suffer the miseries of birth, old age, disease, and death. So this whole endeavor, which the mode of passion places us in, the endeavor for fruitive activities, it does not make any sense. And one who is intelligent will not endeavor in this way. Again, in the 6th canto of the Bhagavatam, the 1st chapter, 52nd verse, and this is actually spoken by the Yamadutas. And they say, the foolish embodied living entity, inept at controlling his senses and mind, is forced to act according to the influence of the modes of material nature, against his desires. He is like a silkworm that uses its own saliva to create a cocoon and then becomes trapped in it, with no possibility of getting out. The living entity traps himself in the network of his own fruitive activities and then can find no way to release himself. Thus, he is always bewildered and repeatedly he dies. And Prabhupada explains, as already explained, the influence of the modes of nature is very strong. The living entity is entangled in different types of fruitive activity. He's like a silkworm trapped in a cocoon. Getting free is very difficult unless he is helped by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this has been our position many, many lifetimes. We've been like the silkworm that's been trapped in a cocoon. And very difficult to come out of these modes of material nature. Prabhupada writes in the context of this verse, according to this verse, if one develops the mode of ignorance, after his death he is degraded into an animal form of life. At least the greatest tragedy of human life, or the story of human history, is the story of lost opportunity. This human form of life is an extremely rare form of opportunity. And if one lives his life in such a way that he becomes covered by the mode of ignorance, then it is certain that such a living entity will be degraded into an animal form of life. If we look at today's population, this means a significant amount of the population. Lost opportunity, human form of life, and is simply losing it for the animal form of life. And a devotee who can see his own condition and never wants to be caught up with the modes of nature also sees the suffering of the other living entities. And thus, a devotee does not want to see the living entity suffer in the animal form of life. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was speaking to Haridas Thakur, and he describes the condition of the living entities in the Kali Yuga. And in Antya Leela, chapter 3, text 50, the Lord tells Haridas, Haridas Kali Kale Yavana Aparam Go Brahmane Imsa Kare Mahadurachara. My dear Haridas, my dear Thakur Haridas, in this age of Kali, most people are bereft of Vedic culture, and therefore they are called Yavanas. They are concerned only with killing cows and Brahmanical culture. In this way, they are engaged in sinful activities. And the purport Prabhupada writes, from this statement of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we can clearly understand the word Yavana does not refer only to a particular class of men. Anyone who is against the behavior of Vedic principles is called a Yavana. And Prabhupada describes who is a Yavana? Anyone who is violent towards cows and Brahmanical cultures. Anyone who eats the cow. And we know today practically the majority of the population of the world, they eat the cow and they're against Brahmanical culture. So most of them, they are in the mode of ignorance, meaning that in the next lifetime, they will take birth in the lower species of life, not in the human form of life. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, recognizing this condition, he felt very, very disappointed, very sad. So one day he approached Haridas Thakur and he asked Haridas Thakur a question. He said, on this earth, there are many living entities, some moving and not moving. What will happen to the trees, plants, insects, and other living entities? How will they be delivered from material bondage? So Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is very concerned. All these living entities who die in the mode of ignorance and take birth in the lower species of life, how will they ever become free? As Prabhupada explains in the purport, they'll have to go through the evolutionary cycle again. That means, from a tree, they'll have to go to aquatics, amphibian, human. It takes so many lifetimes to come back to the human form of life. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very concerned. And he posed this question to Haridas Thakur. And Haridas Thakur replied, "My dear Lord, the deliverance of all moving and non-moving living entities take place only by your mercy. You have already granted this mercy and delivered them. How? You have loudly chanted the Hare Krishna mantra, and everyone moving or not moving has benefited by hearing it. My Lord, the moving entities who have heard your loud Sankirtan have already been delivered from bondage to the material world. And after the non-moving living entities like trees hear it, there is an echo. Actually, however, it is not an echo. It is the kirtan of the non-moving living entities. All this, though inconceivable, is possible by your mercy. When loud chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra is performed all over the world by those who follow in your footsteps, all living entities, moving and non-moving, dance in ecstatic devotional love. My dear Lord, all the incidents that took place while you were going to Vrindavan through the forest known as Jarikanda have been related to me by your servant Balabhadra Bhattacharya." So here we're seeing Haridas Thakur is explaining that even those unfortunate living entities who die in the mode of ignorance and take birth among the lower species of life, such unfortunate living entities, they can be benefited by the loud chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Because when the animals listen to this chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra, they dance in devotional ecstasy. And the moment they do that, they get promoted to the transcendental platform. And Haridas Thakur says the proof or the evidence of this is, my Lord, when you danced and sang through the Jarikanda forest, all of the tigers, the deers, the elephants, and the other animals, they danced and chanted with you. I've heard this. So certainly these living entities will be benefited. So this is a beautiful verse or exchange between Lord Chaitanya and Haridas Thakur. In the purport, Prabhupada goes on to say, otherwise there is no guarantee that the human being will again attain to the human status. Why is there no guarantee? Because without Krishna consciousness, there is no guarantee that one will attain the human status of life, because there is no guarantee what mode one will be at the time of death. One who is outside of Krishna consciousness, even those who are in Krishna consciousness, Sheila, sometimes the question arises in our mind, how do I know whether I am affected by the modes of nature or not? And how will I know that at the time of death, I will not be affected by the modes of nature? That question is answered by the Lord in this chapter itself, where Lord Krishna explains all the symptoms of one who is not affected by the modes of nature. One of our Acharya, Srila Vishnava Chakravarti Thakur, he explains there's two types of bhakti, anishtita bhakti and nishtita bhakti. Means fixed devotional service and wavering devotional service. There is a stage in our devotional life when one will be affected by the modes. That is called anishtita bhakti. But they will come into a stage, and mainly that is a stage of bhava, where one becomes fixed. So at least it is guaranteed those who are practicing Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada says, you are guaranteed a human form of life. But those who are not practicing Krishna consciousness, even those who are living in the mode of goodness, it is not to say that they may not fall into another mode, and even the mode of ignorance. So it is very risky life. Life outside of Krishna consciousness, death is very uncertain because the modes are so overpowering. The holy name of the Lord is the only hope for us. As I was mentioning last time, Srila Prabhupada says, if one has practiced chanting the holy name nicely during one's life, it is certain no matter what condition one is, even if one is in a coma, even if one is asleep, if one has practiced chanting Hare Krishna nicely, then one will be able to chant the holy name of Krishna. And if one is chanting the holy name of Krishna, the modes cannot touch one. And we all know from the example in the 6th canto, chapters 1, 2, and 3, the example which we've quoted previously of Ajamil. And in that canto, there is a very interesting conversation that took place. So we all know how the Yamadutas, at the end of Ajamil's life, they came to take his soul back to the Yamaraj to be judged and punished. But at that point in time, they were stopped by the Vishnudutas. And the first thing the Vishnudutas asked the Yamadutas, they said, if you are actually servants of Yamaraj, you must explain to us the meaning of religious principles and the symptoms of irreligion. So the Vishnudutas, they challenged the Yamadutas. They said, your function is to judge people according to religious principles. And according to our opinion, you are wrongly judging Ajamil. So can you tell us what is your criteria for religion? And then the Yamadutas, they very confidently responded. They said, that which is prescribed in the Vedas constitutes dharma, the religious principles. And the opposite of that is irreligion. The Vedas are indirectly the Supreme Personality of God Narayan, a self-born. This is what we have heard from Yamaraj. They said it's very easy to answer. What is dharma and what is not dharma is in the Vedas. And according to our study of the Vedas, this Ajamil, he deserves to be punished and taken to the planet of Yamaraj. And then the Vishnuduta said, alas, how painful it is that irreligion is being introduced into an assembly where religion should be maintained. Indeed, those who are in charge of maintaining the religious principles are needlessly punishing a sinless, unpunishable person. So the Vishnudutas told the Yamadutas, you have it wrong. You all are acting like you know the religious principles, but alas, painfully we see you do not know. And then they said, everybody knows that if one chants the holy name of the Lord even once, he has performed all atonement. He has become free from sinful reactions. So you are wrongly judging this Ajamil. Then the Yamadutas, they were so confused. They were like really, really confused. And the Vishnuduta said, just go away. Please go away. So they went back to to Yamaraj. And when they went back to Yamaraj, they asked Yamaraj, they said, we are so confused. We are taught there is only one authority. And you are that authority, and you are taught us what should be punished and what should not be punished. But here's a person, only once he chanted the name Narayan, and he was absolved. Can you please explain to us? The moment the Yamaraj heard the Yamudutas utter the word Narayan, he became ecstatic. He became ecstatic. He became so happy because Yamaraj is one of the 12 Mahajans. And then he explained to them about the power of the chanting of the holy names. How the chanting of the holy names is the supreme religious principle. And simply by the chanting of the holy names, one becomes free from all sinful reactions. And then at that time, Yamaraj instructed the Yamudutas, if anybody is chanting the holy name of Krishna, don't touch them. Don't go anywhere near them. Just leave them alone because they are in another category. So from that day onwards, the Yamudutas, they never come close to anyone who is chanting the holy name of Krishna. And Prabhupada concludes the purport to this verse by saying, those who are actually serious about human life should take to the mode of goodness, and in good association transcend the modes and become situated in Krishna consciousness. So that is should be our aim in life. Firstly, we come to the mode of goodness. Then we take the good association of the devotees of the Lord. In this way, we transcend even the mode of goodness. And in this way, our next destinations are guaranteed. Not even the planets of the sages, not even an earthly planet, fruit of activities, and definitely not the lower forms of life. So I'll stop here. I'll take any questions, comments, or reflections that anyone has.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Kusha Mataji.
I was just thinking, would charitable work done with an intention of usually to get some name, fame, and glory, would that come under passion?
Yes. Yes.
So if people who are, there will be, if you're doing a lot of, I can never really understand the difference. It is, you are helping them, you are doing something good, like you open hospitals, schools, you help people, you're doing charitable work, but it will still keep you in the mode of passion, isn't it?
It could be not only necessarily mode of passion, it could be mode of goodness. Very likely could be mode of goodness.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But mode of goodness still conditions us, as Krishna explains here. It means you still have to be in the material world.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The mode of goodness also conditions us. We do good work, and we become satisfied, situated in a peaceful life. Serving other communities. It's admirable. It's good. It's a higher sense of material happiness, but it cannot satisfy the soul completely. And then it has a defined shelf life. As soon as all of those pious credits we get from executing good activities, as soon as they expire, we're back to square one.
So what would be the ideal scenario is, it's not wrong to do these activities, I would think, but you do them with a different mode, I would say, with a different attitude, that you're not doing it for fame or name for yourself, but if you're just doing it truly with the intention of just purely out of the love of your heart.
Yes, but love for the body. Prabhupada explains that there are different types of philanthropic work we can do. We can do philanthropic work based on the body, or we can do philanthropic work based on the soul. Philanthropic work based on the body, certainly it's good. Certainly it helps. Certainly it will result in some higher situation in our next birth. But it's impermanent and it cannot satisfy the soul. Ultimately, all living entities in this material world, we are the soul, we are the Atma. And none of this will really satisfy us completely. Yayatma suprasidati. That is what Sutta Goswami tells the sages at Naimisharanya. In order to completely satisfy the self has to be engaged in devotional service, unmotivated and uninterrupted. It takes a lot of people some time to get around this. A lot of people feel, what is wrong in just being good? I mean, from our perspective, actually our perspective does not count much. Let's just take it from the perspective of the Lord. And from Krishna's perspective, Krishna is saying, yes, in the mode of goodness, you will have some higher standards of living, but it's not going to give you what you really desire. And it's temporary. It's temporary. Krishna says those who are wise, they never endeavor for that which is temporary and that which cannot completely satisfy the self.
So ideally, I think if you could combine both of them, do your devotional service along with if you're doing your philanthropic work, if you combine the two together. Because when you're doing, I'm really sorry, but this always confuses me.
See, Mataji, the point is this. Say suppose you do philanthropic work, right? You're doing punya. When you do punya, you'll get the results, right? And you have to reap those results. If you accumulate a certain amount of punya, right? The way the laws of material nature work. Say you accumulated punya that you must live 100 years in the heavenly planets. That is almost like a baggage you carry. You have to expend that baggage. You have to go and enjoy for those 100 years. But one who is intelligent, we understand even so-called happiness on the material in the heavenly planets. That is not real happiness, is there? And then secondly, an intelligent person knows, the ultimate good I can do for anybody is to help them come out of the material world.
True.
So Prabhupada was once challenged. Yeah, often he was challenged. He said, you Swamiji, y'all are just chanting and dancing and selling books. There are so many hungry, starving people in this world. Why don't you expend and direct your energy towards that end? And Prabhupada said, there are so many people that are doing that already, that are opening hospitals, feeding the poor and doing that. But no one is helping the people solve the real disease,
right?
The root cause. So this is what the Krishna consciousness movement is trying to do. We are trying to tackle the root cause. Right? But at the same time, we have compassion to all living entities. We make sure that those that are hungry are fed. And if people are suffering, we never turn a blind eye to anyone suffering. But it's done from a different platform. It takes time for many people to get around, get around to this understanding.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thanks a lot.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhu, I have a question, also a comment on that, whether if you could do something philanthropically but offer it as service, so offering it back to the Supreme as service, then presumably then that's becomes bhakti because it's being done as karma yoga maybe as well, as a kind of offering back to the Supreme rather than I am doing this to benefit someone in a particular way. So I guess that was one question. And the second was, some of the people you were describing who perhaps are born in a life of poverty or become child soldiers are in very, very difficult situations and maybe will never have access to any connection with Krishna or with the Lord. Is that because they're expending their karma basically from a previous life? So it wouldn't be that they would go to an animal kingdom because they've had no opportunity to make that choice. They've had no access. Maybe they're they're expending their previous karma, and so then perhaps they then would come back once they had, you know, released that karma. So I guess I had 2 questions on that.
Okay, maybe we'll talk about the second one. Yeah, the whole law and the complexities of karma, they're very difficult to understand. But the general principles are laid out by Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. It's all about the consciousness one has at the time of death. And collectively, there are many scenarios that affect the consciousness at the time of death. And if one takes the situation where one has not had any exposure, opportunity for exposure to Krishna consciousness, you know, what is their situation? You know, their situation, they would still be those jivas in those bodies rotating in the material world. And unless they meet a devotee of the Lord Krishna, the situation is quite difficult. But eventually, you know, all souls, we go through the cycle of Kali Yuga, Satya Yuga, temporary destruction, temporary manifestation. All this is happening simply to give the souls some opportunity to reform their consciousness. And Krishna will create many opportunities. All it takes is for one living entity just to step back and using his intelligence of the human life is to think, you know, just reflect on the situation, their situation, and to develop even the slightest desire to connect with the Lord, and the Lord will make some arrangement through different means for that connection to take place. Because Krishna is eager, he's eager for us to come back. Remind me about this, the first question again. Was it to do with doing both, doing devotional service and doing some good work? Was your question?
It was if you do the philanthropic activity, but you offer it to Krishna. So you're not, then in that way, would you not be incurring, you wouldn't be incurring the punya because you would be offering it back. So you would say, this is, you know, in the form of my action, I'm doing this as service. It's the thing you were saying about the perspective from which you do it, knowing that it's still on the bodily level, but because it's necessary, you're offering it back as service alongside bhakti, for example.
Yeah, that is beneficial. That is beneficial, and that will take one gradually to the highest stage. Yeah, because Krishna says that, you know, firstly, engage in my devotional service spontaneously. If you can't do that, follow the regulative principles. If you can't do that, you can do some philanthropic work. The whole purpose is to become gradually detached. You know, detached from both the work and the fruits of one's work. But certainly that will help one. It will not take one immediately to the highest destination, but it will help one progress on the journey, according to the Bhagavad Gita. Yeah. Hare Krishna. Let me see if there's any other questions.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
I've got a question.
Yes.
What activities, what actions are classified as fruitive activities?
What is classified as fruitive activities?
Mm-hmm.
Fruitive activities, there's two types of outcomes of work. One is the work itself, attachment to work, and second is attachment to the fruits of one's work. So any work, there is the work itself, and there's the fruits of work. So fruitive activities mean one wants to enjoy the fruits of that work, and also one is attached to the work itself. One typical example, I'll tell you one story of my personal life. In my very beginning days of Krishna consciousness, I was living in South Africa, Durban, and we used to celebrate the Ratha Yatra festival. And before the festival, we would all get together when we would cut vegetables and fruit, preparing for the cooking the next day. So one day I was very early days in Krishna consciousness. I was cutting some vegetables. So one of the big donors came and he was walking around and looking at the different volunteers, what they were doing. And he came to our table and he said, very good. You're doing good karma yoga. And I said, no, we're not doing karma yoga, we're doing bhakti yoga. He said, no, you're doing karma yoga, you're doing work, you're cutting vegetables, that's karma yoga. And I got a little confused because I wanted to be doing bhakti yoga. So at that time I was in touch with my Guru Maharaj. He's Holiness Giriraj Swami. So I wrote to Maharaj and I said, Maharaj, this is what happened to me, my experience the other day. So I'm a little confused with what I was doing. Was I doing karma yoga or was I doing bhakti yoga? And Maharaj said, it could be both. It all depends on the consciousness of the performer. So any work, it depends on the consciousness of the performer. If we're doing work completely in the mood, this is what Krishna wants me to do. I am not attached to doing this particular work by itself. Neither am I attached to the fruits. That means what I get from it. I'm happy to recognize this as ultimately belonging to Krishna and to work in that consciousness. That he said one is to be free from the fruit of mentality. It's the consciousness really. So you can be working, you could be earning, you could be spending, you can be either in fruit of consciousness or you can be in devotional consciousness. It all depends on your outlook of what you're doing and what you're receiving. Does that make sense to you, Saroj Mataji?
Yes, it does. Yes, thank you. When people do yagnas, for purifying themselves and doing yagnas for the health of people close to them, or even doing yagnas for the healing of the earth, but in the COVID situation, a lot of people are doing that.
Yes.
Is that classified as fruitive, or is it?
Yes, it's classified according to the bhakti, the bhakti wisdom literature. That's classified as fruitive. Yes.
Okay, so as per Krishna consciousness, we don't need to do any of those, do we?
No, Sankirtan Yagya is perfectly adequate.
Okay, thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Chandra Chaitanya Prabhu.
Very interesting session.
Yes, it is.
Yes, and it makes us realize that yes, people all over the world are doing all sorts of pious activities, but that will not get them out of the cycle of birth and death. As you rightly say, you will gain some higher position somewhere, and at the end of that piety, you will come down again and start all over again. This is why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came, Krishna himself, to try and deliver them by the express route, chanting of the holy names. Kalo nasteva gati anyatha. I mean, I'm just shortening it because I think I'm going short of the time. But there is no other way. There is no other way. There is no other way except what you said, the Sankirtan Yagna. The principal means of Sankirtan Yagna, in my understanding, is the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. This is why devotees take so much trouble to do that all over the world.
Yes.
This is an observation.
Thank you, Prabhu, for that comment. That's very true. There's a few questions that come through. I'd just like to read them. There's one from Santosh Mataji. It's a very interesting question. She says, Hare Krishna Prabhuji, when one donates Lakshmi to a needy person, and that Lakshmi is used for impious purposes, how will that affect your deed in the mode of goodness? Yes, Santosh Mataji, that's a very interesting question. When a devotee sees a poor beggar on the street, right, who is in a very pitiful condition, what should a devotee do? Should a devotee give, or should a devotee not give? Some devotees will say we should not give because that is simply punya, simply punya. And that will simply, we have to come back and reap the rewards of that punya. That is not devotional service. Our acharyas and Srila Prabhupada, by his personal example, have given us a very interesting understanding of that particular situation. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, whose disappearance day we celebrated yesterday, he said, and he, by personal example, he used to give in charity to the poor beggars. And he said, by being callous to the suffering of other living entity, our hearts become hard. And bhakti is very difficult to manifest in a hard heart. And we know a devotee really does not like to see other living entities suffer. And a devotee may give out of compassion of his own heart. But a devotee should not think that if I don't give, then my bhakti will be affected. Because bhakti is, in one sense, is completely independent of any karma. It's completely independent of any other karma. But the Acharya says, for the purposes of maintaining a soft heart, for the purposes of recognizing the suffering of the other living entities, seeing the jiva in all living entities, we give. And therefore Prabhupada started the Food for Life program. It started off in Mayapur once when Prabhupada saw that after the devotees had eaten, they would throw their plates. And when they threw their plates, the dogs used to come to scavenge food from the plates. And there used to be some street beggars. They used to fight with the dogs to get the same plate and to get some food. And when Prabhupada saw that, he was so touched. He said, from today onwards, within a 5-mile radius of any temple, no one should ever go hungry. And we should do the Food for Life program. So that is the understanding, the Vaishnava understanding of giving in charity. Let me see if there's any other questions. Some of them I'm struggling to go down.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Okay. Does that satisfy you, Santosh Mataji?
Yes, I felt, I'm in a bit of a contradiction state. Like you said, you have to feel empathy for the needy.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you give the Lakshmi to the needy person, what are you doing for yourself and doing for the other person? Although on the one hand, you're helping the other person, then you walk away thinking you've done a good deed, but then you don't know where that money how that money has been spent.
That is
so
true.
Do you just ignore what the person does with your Lakshmi and forget about it and just feel good that you've tried to help the person?
No. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, I think it's chapter 17, there is charity in the mode of goodness, charity in the mode of passion, and charity in the mode of ignorance. Rather, if you carry some prasadam with you and you see some hungry people, you give them some food, some prasadam, that will be better for them, because you do not know if they will use that Lakshmi to fall more deeper into ignorance. So rather you give them some prasadam. But if they're just poor and they do not look like they are, addicted to some alcohol, they just need some food, then you can make a judgment and give them some Lakshmi.
Okay, thank you, Prabhuji.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Bhagavati Mataji.
Got a question. We are donating, doing the book distribution and the donations for the book. And then we are telling people that if you do this, your name will be there on the yagya. Isn't that something to do with fruitive activities then?
In one sense, you can say that, because you encourage them to get some fruit.
Yeah.
But sometimes our Acharya says just to draw them into a higher activity, we have such how can I say, sweetness to help them to give, because although there may be some fruit of intention there, but because they're giving Shastra Dan, the Bhagavad Gita, the benefit they get from that will slowly help them become purified of any fruit of intentions they have.
And people do it in mode of passion, that one sometimes, don't they?
Possibly. Yeah, possibly, but they will get purification, because it's a transcendental activity. It's a transcendental activity. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. All right, devotees, it's gone almost 9 o'clock now. We've gone over time. Thank you so much for your participation. All glories to your service. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, and we will see each other again tomorrow.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thanks a lot.